I wasn't just a Trump supporter, I was a true believer. He used to tell me, "It doesn't matter what you say, Stephanie. Say it enough and people will believe you." Behind closed doors, Trump mocks his supporters. He calls them basement dwellers. On January 6th, I asked Melania if we could at least tweet that while peaceful protest is the right of every American, there's no place for lawlessness or violence. She replied with one word: no.
Stephanie Grisham's powerful testimony at the DNC underscores the growing disillusionment among Trump's former inner circle. As someone who once believed in Trump's message, Grisham's revelations about his disdain for his own supporters and refusal to denounce violence speak volumes about the kind of leadership he offered behind closed doors. Her decision to endorse Kamala Harris is a significant shift, reflecting broader defections from Trump's camp as former allies seek to distance themselves from the chaos and hypocrisy they once defended.
Well, the biggest reaction is, why didn't she do the things that she's complaining about? All of these things that she talked about, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do everything, but she didn't do any of it. She could have done it 3.5 years ago. She could do it tonight by leaving the auditorium and going to Washington, D.C. and closing the border. She doesn't need a bill. I didn't have a bill. I closed the border and created the safest border we've ever had in the history of our country. She could have done all of these things, and she could still do them. She's got 4.5, 5 months left. She can go there right now. She can do all of the things, many of the things that she's talking about and complaining about.
Trump's immediate response to Kamala Harris's speech at the DNC was as predictable as it was revealing. His immediate focus on what he perceives as her failures, rather than acknowledging any of the substantive points she made, highlights his ongoing strategy of deflection and denial. By insisting that Harris could do it tonight, or that she's had the power all along, Trump attempts to undermine her credibility while ignoring the systemic challenges she has faced in her role. It's a classic Trump move: shift the blame, distract from the real issues, and never acknowledge the opposition's strengths.
And I was in the room when he said, "I don't want to shake hands with those dirty people, those disgusting people." So I think, you have his former press secretary saying this is what he thinks of his supporters. I personally detest the fact that he speaks of them in that way because it's so disrespectful. And what I think what really breaks my heart is just how much they rally around someone who really just doesn't care about them, like has complete disregard, has no identification with the middle class or the working class. And I think that's the contrast, right? You have Donald Trump on that ticket, J.D. Vance, who's constantly attacking women, and you have Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, who are saying, we know what it's like to work through college. I worked my way through college. Like, they can identify.
Grisham's account of Trump's derogatory comments about his own supporters highlights the deep disconnect between his public persona and private contempt. This revelation is particularly damning as it comes from someone who was once part of his inner circle, witnessing firsthand the disdain Trump holds for the very people who elevated him to power. It's a moment that peels back the layers of Trump's populist facade, revealing the contempt he harbors for the ordinary Americans he claims to champion.
Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious.
Kamala Harris didn't hold back during her DNC speech, directly challenging Trump's credibility and highlighting the serious consequences of a potential second term. Her straightforward language cuts through the noise, positioning Trump as a man unfit for the presidency, whose return to power could have dire consequences for the nation. This quote encapsulates the core message of the DNC. The choice in the upcoming election isn't just about political preference, it's about the future of American democracy.
He has no empathy, no morals, and no fidelity to the truth. When I was press secretary, I got skewered for never holding a White House briefing. It's because, unlike my boss, I never wanted to stand at that podium and lie. Now here I am, behind a podium, advocating for a Democrat. And that's because I love my country more than my party.
Stephanie Grisham's stark declaration that she loves her country more than her party encapsulates the moral reckoning that many former Trump officials are undergoing. Her choice to endorse Kamala Harris, despite her long-standing Republican roots, reflects a profound shift in values driven by a recognition of the dangers posed by Trump's continued influence. This statement, coming from someone who once stood at the heart of the Trump administration, underscores the gravity of the situation and the depth of the division within the GOP.
We've all been watching this convention very closely. I can tell you that also the former president has been also watching very closely. He just posted an incredibly lengthy Truth Social post a few moments ago, ranting about the speech you heard on stage tonight from the Pennsylvania governor, Josh Shapiro. He was saying that even though Trump is claiming he is the best friend of Israel, and saying that Vice President Harris hates Israel, even though just last night, about 24 hours ago on that stage, we were listening to her Jewish husband, Doug Emhoff, talk about how she makes brisket for them on Shabbat. But what it really does tell you, Anderson, regardless of what Trump said in that post, is that he is watching this convention just as closely as everyone else. And one thing
Trump's obsessive monitoring of the DNC and his immediate, angry responses highlight his deep concern over the growing momentum behind the Democratic ticket. Despite his attempts to dismiss the significance of the convention, his close monitoring and immediate responses suggest that the momentum building behind the Democratic ticket is something he cannot ignore. The fact that he felt compelled to respond so quickly and with such intensity reveals just how much the DNC is getting under his skin.
If Republicans are being intellectually honest with ourselves, our party is not civil or conservative. It's chaotic and crazy, and the only thing left to do is dump Trump.
Going on to make the case that he sees voting for Kamala Harris as the patriotic thing to do.
Look, you don't have to agree with every policy position of Kamala Harris. I don't. But you do have to recognize her prosecutor mindset that understands right from wrong, good from evil. She's a steady hand and will bring leadership to the White House that Donald Trump could never do. Let me be clear to my Republican friends at home watching. If you vote for Kamala Harris in 2024, you're not a Democrat, you're a patriot.
Former Republican Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan's comments underscore the deep ideological divide within the GOP, as he calls for fellow Republicans to recognize the ethical leadership that Harris represents, contrasting sharply with Trump's chaotic approach. Duncan's remarks highlight the growing number of Republicans who are willing to cross party lines in the name of preserving democratic principles and restoring sanity to the White House. Thanks for watching The Liberal Lens. We want to hear your thoughts on today's discussion. Drop a comment below and let us know your take.